Hey, what's up, guys? Look at this. Jonah Hex. I actually got these comics for 50 cents in a bargain bin somewhere in a local comic store. Jonah Hex, the infamous Western character, probably the most famous DC Western character to survive into the 80s. And you have here the spectacular. So this is back in the day when you'd have. This is really cool. You'd have like specials, DC, where you have like extra pages, right? And of course you had the regular issue here, Jonah Hex. Now what can I say? This one in particular was Jonah Hex and two other Western characters. But the thing with Jonah Hex that you notice, right? Including the awesome Jonah Hex Vertigo series that Joe R. Lansdale and Timothy Truman did, which is probably the best Jonah Hex story ever made, where Jonah Hex fights creatures. What do you know about Jonah Hex? What's he wearing? Oh boy, he's wearing Confederate Gray. Oh, where's Atun Shay? You gonna come over and do your smarmy video where you try to sound reasonable, and then at the end, your true motives come out? Anyway, so now this is in pieces right here. This is cool. You actually had they expected the kid to pull this out and put it on his wall, but that's really good art, man. Look at that. You know, love it. Of course, this time period now is not shown well. It's shown in a very negative, dark light. I mean, the spaghetti western sort of started that, and I prefer those spaghetti westerns to a lot of the American westerns that were done, with the exception, of course, one of the spaghetti western stars who was influenced by those filmmakers and started making his own, the great Clint Eastwood, who obviously Jonah Hex is based on. So, looking through this story, Michael Fleischer, okay, he's the writer. Very interesting guy if you look at his story. And Russ Heath, one of the most underrated artists. And who's this? Your boy Zach's enemy here is the editor. Whatever. This was a crazy story about Jonah Hex as an older man, kind of like the Wild Bunch, where you're already in like the early 20th century. Very violent, right? Jonah Hex is an old man. He's still like punching pigs. You know, people are saying that his time is over. Okay, you're about a year or two away from the Great War, and Jonah Hex is still a bounty hunter. He has a nice Comanche woman, right? Loyal woman, okay? Tribal woman of probably the toughest, most dangerous Indian tribe that ever existed. The enemy of the people, the Comanche. I'm proud of it thoroughly. Okay? They don't cover his Civil War stuff too much. Already, it's a dicey proposition, but the guy was always wearing his Confederate Gray. And in this story, the story actually has a very morbid thing. This is kind of like Jonah Hex gets killed, and the taxidermist puts his body up, and it ends, with into the 20th century, his taxidermist body slowly rotting. Holy crap! And I like this. If you come to love Jonah Hex as we have come to love him, you may not want to read this story. Great story, of one of the ends of Jonah Hex. One of the other Jonah Hex, actually, they made a post-apocalyptic Jonah Hex in the 80s, where he goes into the future, and being a gunman in the old West is a very useful thing in the post-apocalyptic future to be, in the Mad Max future. But anyway, that was an interesting story. Now you get Batlash. Now, who is this? This is the hero. You have a blonde hero who's kind of like a gambler, dandy sort, who has cool things like a Derringer hidden in his pocket watch. Amazing. This guy is a hero. Right? But now this is interesting. Denny O'Neil. Now we all know Denny O'Neil, right? Big liberal at the time. He did the Green Lantern, Green Arrow stories where Green Arrow became this big, guilt-ridden liberal. And Denny O'Neil, he's the guy that started the whole idea of Batman being anti-gut. But Denny O'Neil did write The Question, which was very problematic now, even having Dennis Cohen as the artist. A lot of these street thugs in the Question comic in the 80s were people that you can't really portray like that now. But anyway, and this story was interesting. It's him helping the Chinese community in San Francisco. And what's interesting here is the villains. The villains are Irish. Flaherty Hogan, a real shanty, friggin' leprechaun Irish caricatures. And they are the bad guy. I mean, look at this dude. So it's interesting that the low-life villains are these Irish, tossers. Which is interesting because last I checked, O'Neill is an Irish name. So Denny O'Neill is throwing his people under the bus here in this story, where the Chinese are the sympathetic people. Although at the end, one of the villains is also Chinese, working with those damn Irish. But just having a blonde hero is kind of quaint at this day and age. And man, he's beating the shit out of those mix. Oh, sorry, no offense to any of my Irish readers. Denny O'Neill wrote this, so I thought that was interesting. Now, the last story here, Scalphunter. I did not know of this character. Okay, Michael Fleischer actually created it. He didn't create Jonah Hex, but he wrote Jonah Hex. But he created Scalphunter. Who is Scalphunter? Right? And then you get these. Hey, Atun Shea, you'd like this? These evil Confederate soldiers with these poor people here are gonna get their comeuppance. Okay, from this man. But who is this? Well, he's an Indian. Well, actually, he is a white man. He is one of the many, just like the Simon Gerty comic by Tim Truman. He was a white child that was taken by Indians and raised as a squaw man. Now, that was one of the things the Indians did. They used to call the white man, if you want to call him that, he used to call them squaw men. Okay, they used to impugn the manhood of the whites in the colonies. They weren't really good warriors, most of them, because most of them were slaves, servants. But in general, and they also thought the women had too much of a say over the pale-faced man. So this white man is essentially raised as a slave, and he is he's called a squaw man. Right? That's why they're all laughing at him. So these men are laughing at this white man who is even dressed in women's garb for them, although he's fighting them. And it's very interesting. He's not allowed to carry weapons, just like a woman, right? And it's interesting that the Indian men are seen as shown as being basically as what they were. They had slaves, right? I always say civilization is based on slavery, but tribal people had slaves too. Of course, it was a different thing, but you see here, I thought this was interesting where he falls in love with one of the women, but he's a squaw slave. So he's a guy in between, not just races and worlds. As a white man living as an Indian slave, he's also in between genders. Okay, now he's not one of those occasional, homosexual Indians that would be that third gender, but he's essentially has the status of a woman. He has to carry the stuff, and he's not allowed to have weapons. Very interesting character. Very interesting character. Very interesting story where he actually is not allowed to do the war dance, and he does it himself. And at the end, he does the whole man-cold horse thing with the hooks in the skin. It's an amazing story. And you got to hear the whole thing of the free state. And you got these free men here abolishing slavery. And of course you had all these battles. Now the whole slavery issue is very interesting. You don't want slavery in the border state because if you're a man, how the hell are you going to work? All right. But it's a good story, a really good story. So it shows, him seeing that I've also been a slave here, and he proves his manhood. He actually fights this bully here, right? And at the end, it's just he's gonna help free these slaves. So, good story, man. Really interesting. A lot of things involved there. I was never aware of Scalphunter, the character. I have to check out and find back issues of that. Very interesting that you'd have a character like this. Okay. So now we go to the regular Jonah Hex comic. Oh boy, got all the political enemies. Well, if you think this is politically correct, wait till you go inside and see the villain here. Oh boy. They basically, Jonah Hex unrepentantly captured this dude, and now they're gonna hang him. Okay? After a trial and in a criminal, he's a criminal, unrepentant murderer. Okay, he's been convicted and hung like many men of all races were. Okay? And this is in a comic. Can you imagine that? And the guy's friends, who are also criminals, vile criminals, although one of them is a Union soldier, as you can see. Right? And they're going to get revenge on Jonah Hex. So, remember these sea monkeys? Remember these things? Brine shrimp. Anyway. And then you have a family here. You have a sharecropper family out of like that movie Sounder. You got the guy who's got the, hard of hearing. You have the, you used to put the thing in your ear to, you didn't have hearing aids back then. And look at this. They take advantage of this, right? These people. Kind of like what happens today, but you can't mention that. So he fights some Indians. Oh man, this is like real. For some reason he's blonde here, but Jonah Hex is a redhead, right? So he kills the Indians, right? And oh, look at this. Christy McNichol. I remember her. I remember the lesbians in my neighborhood. The lesbians who were working class tomboy women who were actually kind of cool and liked hanging out with guys, and they didn't hate men. But they really liked Christy McNichol. Whereas, was that Cheryl Ladd, Farrah Fawcett? Wow, look at that. Linda Carter. Anyway, let me get off that. This is there you go. My man Jonah Hex blows this blue coat scumbag up, and then and this guy burns to death. This is the villain. Okay, so this is really like verboten today. Even though Jonah Hex was helping this family here, who these murderer men, they were bad men, were doing it to. So, yeah. A guy wearing Confederate Gray is killing Indians and, criminal black men. Oh, boy. And look, here's more Scalphunter. Look at this. There you go. I hope he kicks Lincoln's ass. Anyways, enough of that. Great stuff, man. Great stuff I found for 50 Cent. I remember Jonah Hex, but, this was interesting seeing that. When you have our hero, unrepentant, with the Confederate Gray, even after the war. And being a real man, fighting any enemy that goes in his way. And good stuff. Michael Fleischer, very underrated writer, very interesting life story actually when I looked into it. So, and a new character I gotta check out, Scalphunter. Very, very interesting. All right, later.